Liberated Living. A Guide to Unconditional Self-Love and Conscious Relationships. Discover your relationship archetype. Copyright Liberated Living, Sullivan & Sullivan, 2019. Website, www.liber8edliving.com. All rights reserved. Printed in the United States of America. No part of this book may be reproduced or transmitted in any manner whatsoever without written permission from the author except in the case of a brief quotation in reviews. Partnership Patterns and Your Archetype 2. Preface 4. The Key to a Good Life 5. In what ways do you escape or attempt to fill empty voids? 6. Self-worth versus self-esteem. 10. Where did these voids begin? 12. Love language types. 13. Cartman triangle. 15. Exploring the 3 relationship archetypes. 15. Attributes of the victim. 17. Understanding the victim. 17. Empowering the victim archetype. 19. Rotating roles. 19. Attributes of the persecutor. 20. Validating the persecutor. 20. Understanding the persecutor. 21. Attributes of the rescuer. 23. Conditional love is the core issue. 23. Running. 24. Emotional reward. 27. So what's the solution? 29. A simple reiteration. 29. An analogy of the gardener. 32. 7-step empowerment strategies. 33. Do I have to be well-versed in the field of psychology to benefit? 33. Check out our additional genetic recoding e-courses and ebooks. 36. Click here to learn more. 36. References. 37. Partnership Patterns and Your Archetype 3. Preface. Break from codependency patterns and cycles within primary relationships. Overcome unhealthy entanglements and power struggles, as well as habits of rescuing or enabling loops by utilizing an effective 7-step PANACEA system to recode negatively programmed beliefs and heal interrelational dynamics. This system incorporates a triangle model conceived by psychotherapist Stephen Cartman that is extremely valuable in developing greater self-awareness in our relationship transactions, lending additional key insights into the behaviors of others. Relationships can take many forms such as marriage and romantic partnerships, business relationships, contracts, negotiations, legal agreements, and other primary relationships. We cooperate to a greater or lesser degree in our varied relationship transactions with one another. These relationships play a primary role in shaping us into who we are today, catalyzing our growth potential. These primary relationships are mirrored access into our own consciousness and blind spots. Why do we continue to attract certain types of people and repeat lessons in our life? Conflicts and tension within partnerships can serve to teach us important lessons, most often through resistance, challenging us to grow. What's more, is that lessons will be repeated until learned and mastered. When we unconsciously operate from fear or need in our relationships with others, it is due to unmet psychological needs from our youth, or perceived voids that were genetically transferred, and persist throughout our life. Consequently, we'll seek to have these needs met by our partnerships and within primary relationships, which leads to extreme disappointment and conditional love-based relationships, causing cycles of codependence until we learn how to break the unhealthy and destructive pattern with greater self-love. That is, change our genetic programming by recoding the genetically encoded beliefs. This ebook is designed to provide solutions and help us self-correct these codependent behaviors, enabling us to establish successful and conscious interrelational dynamics within relationships. This 7-step panacea model will guide you to transform your primary relationships from cycles of conflict and resentment, or even codependency patterns, to that of establishing mutual unconditional love, reassuring healthy, conscious partnerships. By validating your own self-worth, you will change the inner game operating from your real internal power of self-love and confidence. If you desire more guidance with greater love, beginning with self-love, this ebook covers insights and solutions with various partnership patterns and your archetype 4. Strategies to course correct in the most common core challenges throughout this ebook, so stay tuned to gain victorious insights. The Key to a Good Life. Self-analysis can serve as the best way to increase greater levels of self-awareness and help us all to individually advance, so I want to begin by asking a question centered on self-awareness. Where can you begin to demonstrate more self-love? If you feel uncertain, then it will likely be evident where you may not currently feel loved by others. It may also reveal where you believe you personally have room to grow. Take mental inventory where that might currently be reflected in your life and keep them in mind as we cover insights with solutions and strategies to increase unconditional love to higher capacities throughout these chapters. So, stay open-minded and enjoy. It's very common to feel the desire for our partner to meet specific expectations and ideals. However, our heart is waiting on us to fully love ourselves the way we want others to love us. Unconditionally, that is. As we do so, we can also unconditionally love others and begin to feel more loved by others. We often can't let love in or may not even feel loved by others when we haven't let our own love in. This is why it is essential to fill your life with self-love and create a space that welcomes not just any love, but the love you deserve. This is how we can be the change we wish to see and live empowered instead of being at the mercy of others. Partnership patterns and your archetype 5. And unconsciously needing or hoping a partner will love us the way we ache to be loved. It's our responsibility alone to ensure that we are self-loving so that we don't inadvertently place that responsibility or expectation onto others or anything outside of us. The tendency to look outside ourselves is universally inherent and part of our emotional development. It might be obvious that we have areas where we can increase our self-love or recognize our insecurities, but it's not always obvious how to increase love for ourselves more wholly. The other individual we may place our hopes in loving us is the key to reflecting this answer, which is why we may feel so inclined to keep seeking these answers to our own essential needs. The mirror is really the best biofeedback mechanism we have, thanks to our reflective paradigm reality. Relationships can serve as the best schooling we have for love, specifically self-love, since you are the answer you have been waiting for. It all starts with ourselves. Self-love is our true ticket to freedom and fulfilling our own heart. Our heart is the compass to a life filled with love. Self-love is the answer, it's the true panacea. Let's continue to explore more. You likely know where you feel limited and want more freedom in your life. This very desire is innate in each of us. We're all anatomically designed the same way and the heart simply wants everything. Perhaps you're doing all you can to resolve any limitations you're feeling. However, if you want to change your circumstances, you must go deep enough to address the core underlying issues and heal the inner wounds. Here's a hint, it's more than thinking positive alone and trying to control your thoughts. Unfortunately, that's where we can often get trapped. Our minds are very powerful, complex, and contrarily, far more simple than that, but psychology plays a major role. We've all heard the famous adage that, the key to a good life is good relationships. So, what is the key to a good relationship? Well, if we also know that the relationship we have with ourselves reflects the relationships we have with others, then it's obvious where to start. Partnership patterns and your archetype 6. We can't argue that our partner isn't meant to complete us, as conventional thinking may suggest, but our partner may catalyze our greatest growth potential as an instrument to complete ourselves. Relationships can be the best teachers and schooling we have. However, our need or innate desire to feel complete conceptually, in our lives, may keep us entangled in ongoing cycles of codependency, being at the mercy of others, and perpetually seeking happiness outside of us when we know it's an inside job. First of all, codependency is not only to relationships and addiction is not only to substances. How we escape pain, voids, or discomfort is often determined within our genetics or more specifically, our epigenetics. How do you self-soothe? For example, we're all well aware that addiction is twice as likely if we had a parent that had addictions. But what were they addicted to? Working? Gambling? Shopping? Drugs or alcohol? And how has this impacted us? Where are we repeating these codependent behaviors or even resisting these genetic predispositions? Let's explore the myriad of ways the mind chooses to escape pain and problems. Partnership patterns and your archetype 7. In what ways do you escape or attempt to fill empty voids? To some, electronics and substances may be the most obvious, but if it's psychologically inherent in all of us to turn to addiction or codependency to cope, then perhaps there is an infinite list of escaping mechanisms to run to. Did you know that our perceived voids may be the greatest cause of all our saboteurs? Can you relate to any of the codependent/escaping behaviors listed? Relationships, money, career, prescriptions or substances, food, yes, even chemicals such as table sugar, junk food, or soda electronics, shopping, excessive weightlifting, sports, and fitness, diet pills, or even dependency on health supplements, gambling, gaming, status, titles. Partnership patterns and your archetype 8. Substances or any other form of mind-altering stimulus, addiction, and escaping behaviors. Unfortunately, these are all destructive forms of dependency because, when in excess, it is used as an unhealthy outlet to fill a void from feeling lack or emptiness that produces a powerful imbalance in the brain, inducing a neurochemical response and an overproduction of those chemicals. What does this mean exactly? Chris Prentice explains in The Alcoholism and Addiction Cure, 2010, that, the more you engage in a type of behavior, the greater your desire for it will become. Whether you have a compulsion or addiction to sex, alcohol, food, shoplifting, lying, cheating, or any other compulsive activity, you're engaging in that activity to stimulate a chemical secretion that produces an effect in your brain that brings about the desired sensation, and you're addicted to that sensation or any other neurotransmitter. The same is true for anger or any other emotion. We become addicted to it because of the psychological and physiological effect it has upon us because of the adrenaline, dopamine, and other chemicals we create with our anger. It doesn't matter whether your craving is for emotions such as excitement, anger, depression, sadness, or joy, or whether it is for the feelings you get from using addictive drugs or alcohol. When you discover the emotional reason for using addiction as an escape and seek to remedy the real problem, you will heal your need to turn to those addictive substances and behaviors, and the addiction will leave of its own accord. So, now you can think of an addiction, any addiction, as a craving for an emotion. When you discover the reason for using addiction as an escape and seek to remedy the real problem, you will heal your need to turn to those addictive substances and behaviors, and the addiction will leave of its own accord. Chris Prentice. When we don't heal the real issue behind the dependency, we may end up trading one addiction for another, which is referred to as addiction transference. Excessive use of mind-altering substances or compulsive behaviors impacts the brain's reward. Partnership patterns and your archetype 9. Pathway as chemical messengers release more neurochemicals, creating conditional responses and causing long-term chemical imbalances. Dependence sets in an individuals may feel compelled to repeat the intake of drugs or addictive behaviors to avoid the initial problem as well as the negative emotional and physical imbalance, such as withdrawal symptoms. Thus, the addictive cycle. This expands our perspective on the role of our emotions and thoughts as we can see the chain of events that take place as new cells and neuropeptides are created according to what we choose to think and feel. Pert, Molecules of Emotion, 1997. Although we are well-meaning, looking outside ourselves to fill these needs, i.e., voids, or to validate our self-worth induces our codependent behaviors. What do you fear if you didn't have one of the dependencies you have turned to in your life? Even though we can all relate to some form of addiction, this is poor coping simplified. These codependencies can impact our self-worth, causing us to become powerless to someone or something external, rather than addressing the real void and gaining empowerment through core solutions and strategies. To illustrate a personal example, having possessed a great passion for health and fitness over previous decades, I developed an obsession and love for diet and exercise. I looked forward to the outcome of how I felt by integrating the principles of good physical exercise and proper dietary management. Yet, I also feared the negative impact on my well-being if I did not frequently engage in a high-standard, healthy lifestyle, which further reinforced an aggressive fitness regimen. As a result of this mental programming regarding excessive physical fitness, I found that I would suffer from physical pain or wear and tear on my body when overdoing physical exertion. Therefore, the fear of illness and physical pain was the negative fuel to what became an addictive cycle that began to own me, focusing on the limiting belief rather than the outcome I desired. I would take pride in myself that I only had healthy addictions, but nonetheless, it was in fact, an addiction that had negative consequences, feeling incomplete without it or dependent on it. Through the lesson of resistance, I lent the power to my fear more than to the embodiment of experiencing good health and vitality. When we can ask ourselves if we're acting out of fear versus faith in our choices from our psychological programming, then we can align to our ideal outcomes by living congruent to our values and principles in a way that empowers us and doesn't work against us. Partnership patterns and your archetype 10. Self-worth versus self-esteem. Self-esteem is our internal assessment of our qualities and attributes, such as feeling confident in appearance or a physical capability. Consider what may happen if you're not confident in your qualities or attributes, then you're likely in trouble. Hence why having a strong sense of self-worth will trump it all. Let's say you're trying something new like yoga with other mastered yogis and yet you're not feeling confident in this practice around those who are. Do you feel patient and loving yourself through the learning curve for trying, or do you perhaps feel that you're on display and scrutinized for others to judge? This is where self-worth is particularly important if you feel set back by inevitable changes and challenges or have the propensity to hang your self-worth on the acceptance and approval of others. It can be challenging not to look outside of ourselves for answers, to meet our needs, or for personal validation when it has been in fact, both conditioned and biologically wired in us. Turning to external factors is our ego's attempt to generate emotional security through approval, acknowledgement, or recognition from others, although it will never satisfy our unmet emotional needs and can leave us with the tendency to fill our plate rather than fill our cup. This is often a proclivity of epigenetics, such as whether you have a codependency on relationships, status, career, substances, shopping, electronics, busyness, or any other form of false stimulus and escaping behaviors. Remember, self-worth only comes through personal validation rather than to endlessly depend on the ego's need for validation. Partnership patterns and your archetype 11. We also manufacture these neurochemicals, example, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin internally through positive feeling sensations, such as gratitude or love, which should never be sought externally. This will only lead to many unforgiving repercussions, including addiction cycles, codependence, and other needy behaviors, giving our innate power to things or individuals externally a label inconsistent with who we all aspire to be. 1. Self-worth isn't tied to external factors and what others think, but most importantly how you feel about yourself. 2. If you are trying to fill a perceived void and are still seeking love and support where you are not receiving it, instead of fully embracing and receiving the love and support where it is already given, then this is a form of self-defeat. We must direct our attention and energy to where it serves us. Starting with self-love by meeting our own needs so we won't be labeled as needy. 3. When we continue to look for love in the wrong places, i.e., where it's not available, i.e., emotionally unavailable partners, whether it be in relationships or wanting to feel better about ourselves through anything outside of us, it is a form of codependency, rather than receiving it where it is available and channeling it inwardly. This way you are no longer living at the mercy of others to meet your needs or fill any voids, but meeting them internally. Few. 4. Everyone's perspective and personal stories are valid because perception is our reality. We will only see through our personal filters of understanding and comprehension. Just as you have your own story, it lends valid reasons why you think and behave the way you do, which is according to your beliefs and perspectives. Your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs are valid. This principle is as true for you as it is for others, even if you have differing perspectives. We all perceive life through our own lens and cognitive filters. The majority of these perspectives were derived from subconscious programs due to inherited conditioning, epigenetic behaviors from our ancestors and other generational patterns, societal conditioning and limiting beliefs formed from imprinted events, which became our perception of reality. Becoming aware of these programs is our life's journey to self-awareness designed to free us from the limitations that are the cause of self-imposed bondage. Partnership patterns and your archetype 12. Where did these voids begin? If we want to get beyond relationship conflicts and temporary fixes to identify root solutions and experience lasting, conscious relationships, then we need to go deeper. Yes, please? We must first look at our inherent programming to identify the codependency patterns to truly create impact and reprogram the subconscious beliefs at the DNA level. Are we lending these unmet needs or perceived voids the attention they truly deserve? Our inherited dispositions can be the most stubborn emotional patterns to overcome. Perceived voids evolve as a result of the child seeking to fill their need for love and affection, beginning with a parent during difficult times and perceiving those needs as not being met. This often leaves them feeling unloved, and if they were told no or denied something, it commonly leaves them feeling wronged or shamed. Not feeling loved, good enough for love, or worthy of the love we desire, are common subconscious beliefs in which most fears are centered. If the child feels his/her emotional needs were dismissed or overlooked, he may not be able to self-regulate emotionally, causing poor coping mechanisms of escapism as a means to self-soothe, i.e., through the codependency path. It's no one's fault the child may not have felt loved, but unfortunately, the damage can last a lifetime. Just ask any therapist. Most commonly, these unfulfilled needs are unwittingly transferred to a partner or spouse, now placing those expectations on their partner to meet these needs, great or small. Whoops, sorry honey. By the way, I'll need my feet rubbed every night, alright? These perceived voids often translate to that of the primary love language that we were denied of and in turn desire from a partner, and therefore become capable of only receiving love in a specific manner, which limits ourselves from feeling loved. For example, if we did not receive adequate affection as a child, we may become desperate for it as an adult or from a partner. No fair, right? Partnership patterns and your archetype 13. Love language types. Now, let's explore love languages. What is your primary love language? Have you ever thought to explore why? Imagine, if you would, an ideal relationship, but the only disadvantage that stifles the growth and success of a romantic partnership hinges on individual terms and conditions. Take, for example, a child who may have felt physically abandoned in youth that will consequently have the propensity to turn to abandoned partnerships or potentially abandon their own partner. This fear is conditioned by past experience from the same pattern and belief in abandonment that reinforces self-sabotage behaviors. Consequently, their love language type will most likely be quality time because it was likely an unmet need or void in their childhood. In another case, if you still seek acknowledgement from a parent, then you will seek the same acknowledgement with others. It was likely conditioned by the parent you seek it from because they too have lacked it from within themselves and perhaps one of their parents. The generational pattern repeats. We have learned that same style of absence as the parent that we didn't receive acknowledgement or validation from, seeking it now from a partner or primary relationship side in the form of physical affection, quality time, gifts, or words of affirmation as an example, and the void may become one of our predominant love languages until it is no longer perceived as a void to fill. Can you see how this may relate to you? These are examples of how we unconsciously operate from fear within our relationships, which will only work to our disadvantage by depending on others. Partnership patterns and your archetype 14. Wouldn't this behavior disqualify the good and love that others are demonstrating if we fail to receive it in the forms that love is available to us? Isn't this an act of conditional love? Wouldn't this also squander the love we want to both give and receive? Doing so takes the power out of our hands, as well as out of the hands of others that also want to express their affections toward us and also simply love and be loved. A total lose/lose scenario. Perceived voids persist throughout our life, seeking to compensate for the lack of overcorrecting within primary relationships, which will create power struggles until we learn how to break the destructive pattern. That is, change our epigenetic expression by genetically recoding the subconscious programs. The positive takeaway from perceived voids is that through the determination of working through them with healthy and adaptive coping responses, we will learn how to turn a weakness into a strength. More than likely you will master the previous weakness that perhaps, it may even translate into a career or transferable skill that can finance your passion or lifestyle. For instance, the victim of emotional abuse may turn to a vocation as a victim's advocate, providing emotional support, and so forth. Let's take a closer look to better understand ourselves and learn where our codependent behaviors come from, which will help explain why we continue to attract certain types of people and repeat lessons in our life. We will only repeat lessons if we do not learn from them. Pay attention as we cover the attributes of these following archetypes and consider who this might pertain to in your life and which role applies most to you. If you are not aware of your love language types, you can take the love language test and consider any perceived voids from your youth and whether or not it will correlate or have some bearing on your primary love language type. Click here to take a love language test and rate the highest probability between 1 to 10 from these 5 love language types crafted by Dr. Gary Chapman. Partnership patterns and your archetype 15. Cartman triangle. Let's start by referring to the diagram of the Cartman triangle of the victim, rescuer, and persecutor to assist you with this section. The drama triangle is a social model that was conceived by Stephen Cartman in 1968 that describes the codependent cycles and power struggles that exist within relationships. Exploring the 3 relationship archetypes. The Cartman drama triangle maps the archetypes of the dysfunctional social roles that can regularly occur between people in a conflict that each of us can relate to during these times. Although it illustrates extreme examples of our maladaptive responses in these 3 roles, codependence is a natural part of our emotional development until we reach personal accountability to establish empowerment. These roles signify primal reactive patterns where we often find ourselves either giving our power away or attempting to gain power from others and alternating between these roles. Unconscious emotional reactions, as illustrated in this triangle, are from distorted beliefs and epigenetic programming that serve as internal mirrors into our blind spots, unresolved emotions, and unmet needs, which is necessary to uncover in order to restore wholeness and gain emotional integration. Unmet needs are generally where our hot buttons are. Partnership patterns and your archetype 16. Found. The drama roles we undertake are completely subjective, as we rarely consider the habitual patterns and relationship dynamics we have with others, but rather assume that conflicts and problems are someone else's fault and are unaware of our part. Each of the archetypes in this model fails to understand their self-perpetuating behaviors or perceive the power to change their circumstances, defaulting to specific archetypal roles. Like a game of musical chairs without all the fun. Although we may identify more with a primary role, say naturally behaving like the rescuer for instance, we will rotate between roles throughout different scenarios in our life, such as being a victim of a circumstance. Or being angry about the outside circumstance and responding like the persecutor with anger and blame. Regardless of what position we start at in the triangle, all roles inevitably originate from and end up in the victim position because these roles exist from the constructs of unconscious power struggles that arise from a lack of personal empowerment from individual accountability, which describes our codependent relationships with one another and is a fundamental fear of not feeling significant or good enough and wanting to prove our worth. Unconscious processes are typically inherited and run our primitive fight or flight responses, driving our emotional reactions and behaviors. This results in us using what Dr. Greg Bear calls getting and protecting behaviors in his Essentials of Real Love series. Acting like a victim, blaming, lying, running away, or attacking are examples of getting and protecting behaviors, which you will see demonstrated throughout the Cartman drama triangle with the 3 archetypes. Once we heal the unresolved emotional and internal wounds, we will heal our reactive patterns and triggered responses. Partnership patterns and your archetype 17. Attributes of the victim. Victims believe that things are outside of their control and happening to them. Their stance is poor me. The victim feels oppressed, helpless, attacked, powerless, sorrowful, hopeless, victimized, and ashamed by a persecutor or outside circumstances. Victims can seem unable to make decisions, solve problems, take pleasure in life, or achieve solution-oriented insight. Graham, Resources for Recovering Resilience, 2019. The victim often takes responsibility for the pain or emotional burden that was transferred onto them from the persecutor, perpetuating feelings of helplessness and negativity. This is one way in which victims unconsciously give their power away to the persecutor, placing themselves in the victim/martyr role due to a core belief of feeling powerless to others' control or outside circumstances. Because they fear acting like a persecutor, they believe that it is nobler to be a victim than a persecutor. As a result, they learn to take emotional responsibility for others and carry these heavy burdens. Victims will seek out a rescuer who will save them from a persecutor but also perpetuate the victim's state of helplessness. Victims have an emotionally feminine reactive pattern that can be submissive and passive, but place blame on the persecutor for exerting too much control or attempting to dominate them. Understanding the victim. Generally, victims have suffered from some form of abuse or hardship, whether in youth or early life. Children are unable to defend themselves against the abuse of offenders or perpetrators and do not deserve the harm or emotional neglect they have been subjected to. The pain from abuse or neglectful experiences can be difficult to overcome. Psychological abuse from parents, teachers, peers, caregivers, or others who demean, bully, criticize, or humiliate the youth can inflict serious, long-lasting injury. Both inadequate attention and malnourishment from neglect can interfere with proper emotional and social development. Partnership patterns and your archetype 18. Compassion, understanding, and most of all validation is extremely important to those who have been victimized and is a crucial part of their healing. They seek the love and understanding that they once lacked from genuine human care and affection. They need to understand that it is okay to feel the way they do and that what happened to them was disempowering and not an appropriate act of love. To help them heal, the victim needs to extend the level of compassion and understanding for themselves that they seek in others. As they gain an understanding of their perpetrator's behavior in return, this will minimize their fear so they can end this victim/persecutor pattern and reclaim their power rather than continue giving it away by fearing persecutor types. It's important to note, however, that there are limits to how much validation a person should require. There comes a time when our deep-seated need for compassion or validation can form long-standing grievances or turn into attention-seeking and cripple our ability to heal and receive the healing we need. Victims can get caught up in self-pity and look for the sympathy of others in their quest to feel validated. This can lead to entitlement behaviors in some victim archetypes, especially if they were coddled during times of hardship or illness. This can also lead to narcissistic behavior or cause them to behave charming or manipulative to get their way or get others to do what they want in their ongoing endeavor to feel validated. There are multiple ways in which victims will seek validation, and this is a common way that an enabled personality will deny responsibility and continue to seek sympathy or attention. Frequently, victims of abuse suffer from poor self-esteem, which can grow to feelings of self-hatred because abuse often leaves them feeling useless, unloved, and unwanted, causing them to become vulnerable to depression, suicide, or psychosomatic illnesses. In an effort to cover up their emotional pain and insecurities, over time, they may try to find an escape by turning to addictions, or they may turn to pride, which is a false sense of security and an attempt to cover hidden insecurities. Or, they may use getting and protecting behaviors, which they do for the emotional reward. For instance, Dr. Greg Bear explains that victims are frequently feeling sorry for themselves while looking for validation due to the payoff of acting like a victim. If we can convince people that we've been wounded and treated unfairly, they'll often stop hurting us and give us their sympathy. Partnership patterns and your archetype 19. Attention and support. That's why we act like victims and have played this role at different points in our life, wittingly or unwittingly. Empowering the victim archetype. When victims deny their own wants and needs, take the blame for everything, and give in to whatever the other person wants even if it contradicts their desires, it perpetuates this role. It also keeps them from being responsible for their own fearfulness and passivity. Ultimately, the victim needs to reclaim their power by asserting stronger boundaries where they are less susceptible to absorbing the distress or emotional weight of others. Victims need to face their fears and take new action, even if it means allowing others to empower them with new skills in the areas that this archetype feels inadequate to engender greater confidence in themselves. Once they gain confidence in themselves and provide the emotional comfort and strength they desire from internal sources, it will prevent them from feeling like a victim and continually seeking validation or empathy from a rescuer. Rotating roles. To further illustrate this triangle and the rotating roles, when the rescuer tries to save the victim from a persecutor, it subconsciously implies to the victim that they are incapable, which also causes them to feel powerless because the victim lacks their own confidence in their capabilities. Therefore, the victim will begin to resent the rescuer, and the rescuer will begin to feel unappreciated for all of their hard work and effort in saving the victim. The rescuer's resentment will begin to fester, causing them to be angry toward the victim, rotating them to now begin acting like the persecutor with blame and anger toward the victim. Now they have both fallen prey to the victim position, unaccountable for each of their own part. However, once the rescuer can believe in the capability of the victim by either inspiring or empowering them. Partnership patterns and your archetype 20. While breaking from their codependency of needing to feel needed or valued, they can mutually become empowered and break the unhealthy codependency cycle. Attributes of the persecutor. The persecutor dominates and plays the role of the authoritarian. The persecutor insists it's all your fault and uses attacking behaviors toward the victim, such as criticism and blame, sets strict limits, can be controlling, bossy, rigid, authoritative, angry, manipulative, and unpleasant. Persecutors keep the victim feeling oppressed through threats and bullying. Likely, this behavior was learned and once modeled in their environment. In terms of resilience, persecutors won't bend or be flexible, can't be vulnerable because they fear the risk of being a victim themselves. Persecutors yell and criticize, but they don't actually solve any problems or help anyone else solve the problem. Graham, Resources for Recovering Resilience, 2019. The persecutor uses a scapegoat to transfer the responsibility of his or her emotional burden onto the victim through the use of attacking behaviors, such as blame, anger, and projection, making it the victim's fault. This is the persecutor's unconscious attempt to gain power and control due to the core belief of feeling inadequate or not enough, and the fear of feeling weak or vulnerable. Persecutors have a masculine and dissociative reactive pattern. Validating the persecutor. It is important to understand that behind every villain is a wounded inner child. Persecutors were once the victim themselves and may have suffered abuse or other types of traumatic experiences that are still unresolved. Traumatic experiences may even lead to a switch in personality where they will become the abuser or the perpetrator in place of the victim to protect themselves from further harm or abuse. They resent having felt defenseless and retaliate with misdirected. Partnership patterns and your archetype 21. Anger at others. We can think of the persecutor as someone who was likely bullied in the past and subsequently became a bully as a protection mechanism. Therefore, the persecutor role was a way of survival. Their fear is feeling weak and vulnerable, which is why they criticize the victim, and the archetypal role of the persecutor helps them to avoid that same dreadful fate or reality. Persons who have experienced extreme trauma can tend to block out their pain, leaving them dysregulated or fragmented. They may suffer from self-dislike for the person they really are because they were left feeling unwanted and uncared for. This can result in pseudo-identities, such as masked personalities or other dissociative identity disorders, as an attempt to run away from themselves and don a false front to others. Their lack of concern or empathy for others is due to the disconnection of their own feelings and denial of their own pain. Understanding the persecutor. Attacking. Persecutors are easily provoked to anger as a reaction and protection mechanism when it comes to dealing with their emotions, and commonly use attacking as a getting and protecting behavior. Dr. Greg Bear explains that attacking is a behavior that motivates another person through fear and intimidation to behave in a way that we want. Projected anger and blame are two of the most common forms of attack. For example, with our anger, we can get people to give us attention, respect, authority, power, flattery, approval, even sex. But of course, they're giving us those things to avoid our anger, not from genuine love or affection. In addition to anger, we dominate and accuse by making people feel guilty, criticizing them, withdrawing approval, physically intimidating them, and using positions of authority at work, at home, and elsewhere, all in order to get a false sense of love and protect ourselves from fear. These are examples of how power struggles play out with others. We are familiar enough with the expression, the guilty accuse. Projection is simply a deflection of another's own guilt conscience because we can only perceive others through our own understanding of ourselves. This is a classic example of the mirror technique. Those that accuse don't know any different other than what they know of themselves. The ego's defense is blaming, for only the ego blames it all. Often when someone blames, judges, criticizes, or belittles another, it gives a false sense of power or control over others. Attempting to make someone else small or inferior, tricks the persecutor into believing it will make themselves feel. Partnership patterns and your archetype 22. Superior. The ultimate purpose of projection is always an attempt to get rid of guilt. Yet it is only a way to conceal it. Blame. It is common to find ourselves blaming others for the misfortunes in our lives. We don't realize that often our first impulse is to place blame somewhere else and believe that others are at fault. However, this will only add to our problems, while reinforcing our state of helplessness by limiting our resourcefulness and problem-solving skills that come through accountability. For some of us, we tend to take many things too personally, while others do not let things bother them as easily, adapting to difficult situations. Those who take things more personally will often make the mistake of believing they have suffered more because they dwell on it more. Because others are not as upset as they are, they feel their pain must have been much greater. Denial. Feeling hurt is normal and is not a sign of weakness so long as we do not deny our feelings and can eventually heal and move on. We lie when we don't take responsibility for our own feelings, especially if we're trying to place blame elsewhere. No one else is in charge of your emotions and how you respond to painful events except you. Blame is disempowering and keeps us trapped in a state of feeling like a victim. Blaming others for the way that you feel will only perpetuate the suffering and prevent you from the self-empowerment that is gained through accountability, which is how we heal. This means that you would prefer to be a victim rather than victorious over your life because you mistakenly believe there will be a payoff. This kind of blame and anger will only keep us in the victim and persecutor role along with prolonged bitterness that may even cause us to behave like a villain. Are you spending too much time dwelling on the wrongs in your life? Is it time to make adjustments and confront unresolved emotions that will enable healing in your life? Partnership patterns and your archetype 23. Attributes of the rescuer. The rescuer's line is "Let me help you." Rescuers are codependent and classic enablers that feel guilty if they don't go to the rescue to save those in need, but fail to meet their own needs. Rescuers are frequently agitated, overworked, tired, caught in a martyr style while resentment festers underneath. Although the rescuer is well-intended, their rescuing has negative effects. It keeps the victim dependent and gives the victim permission to fail. It also takes the victim's wings away, leaving them feeling incapable or powerless. The rescuer's desire to come to the rescue is rooted in their ability to empathize from the absence of others coming to their aid, knowing what it feels like to struggle. However, the rewards derived from the rescuer role allows them to be independent of others' help and ignore their own issues. Their actual primary interest is really an avoidance and reflection of their own problems. A concern for the victim's needs prevents the rescuer from taking accountability for their unresolved need. The enabler disempowers the victim by rescuing him/her, causing the victim to feel more helpless and powerless, sending the unspoken message "I don't believe in you, you're incapable of doing this on your own, you need me to help you," and so forth. Also they can feel needed. Graham, Resources for Recovering Resilience, 2019. Although the intention is an act of compassion to prevent others from the suffering or struggle that perhaps they themselves have endured, this causes them to depend endlessly on others in need to validate their self-worth. On some level, most of us can relate to the rescuer role because there are a number of ways that we can rescue that are either protective or over-nurturing, which is both a masculine and feminine archetypal role. Conditional love is the core issue. Although unaware, the archetype's inclination of giving to get is a classic indication of conditional relationships that establishes unhealthy codependencies. Rescuers may not be aware that they operate from conditional love because this was all they've known. It's likely that the rescuer had to learn independence in the early stages of life and may not know how to ask for help or may have emotional partnership patterns and your archetype 24. Scars around not feeling supported, which leads to a blind spot in developing the capacity to ask for support when needed. When people did not receive sufficient unconditional love as children, it leaves them feeling empty and alone. As a result, they unconsciously want to feel valued or needed, which enlists them into these codependent relationship cycles of helping people in hopes to derive emotional security and feel worthwhile, but also superior to that of a victim. In youth, if the rescuer was given many consequences and conditions from the parent or caregiver, this was one way that conditional love was modeled and the rescuing became a programmed response to fulfill one's obligations. Similarly, if the rescuer grew with an angry, manipulative, or controlling parent, the child may have developed a people-pleasing personality to avoid the hostility of the parent. Personality changes may also foster other unnatural identities, which can cause switches in archetypal roles. For example, an otherwise strong or assertive personality type may yield passivity where the individual avoids speaking up and voicing one's true feelings for the sake of avoiding similar harsh realities or turmoil from their home life in youth. People-pleasing personalities might avoid authentic self-expression in fear of losing the love and approval of those they aim to win over. Running. Rescuers are avoidant types that run away from their problems for the obvious reasons of having a fear of facing them. Running is getting and protecting behavior. If we simply move away from a source of pain, we're less likely to be hurt, so running becomes a way of protecting ourselves. Withdrawing, avoiding people, leaving relationships, avoiding responsibilities and conflicts, and being shy are all forms of running or hiding. Abuse of drugs, alcohol, gaming, and other addictions are other forms of escape and ways to run. Unknowingly, we also use getting and protecting behaviors as a substitute for unconditional love to fill our emptiness with whatever feels good in the moment, known as immediate or instant gratifications. For instance, we may abuse money, anger, violence, food, sex, alcohol, drugs, and partnership patterns and your archetype 25. Pursue other shallow things in place of real love to escape our pain. All of these consist of variations of praise, power, and pleasure. Running comes from a lack of courage and strength to confront ourselves and our problems. A more chronic and severe method of escaping is when we mask our personalities in order to hide our true identity and appear as something we're not or something we perceive as more acceptable. Yet, it requires courage to confront our problems in order to overcome them. Courage is not fearing what any person will think of you, but having the integrity to follow what's in your heart and is right and true for you. Avoiding conflict means avoiding solutions and problem solving, which is an essential life skill. It also requires unconditional love without the hope for personal gain, but rather a mutual gain to reach a resolution. Have the courage to be honest and courage to be real, which is the courage to authentically be yourself. Healthy relationships involve taking the risk of losing the approval of others by standing up and voicing our needs and desires, unveiling our true personalities, which would open rescuers up to unconditional love in relationships. Due to the conditions that were placed upon them, rescuers feel it is their duty to take responsibility for others, often making themselves physically or emotionally available even if others are not there for them in return. Their hope in place is to feel worthwhile and appreciated. But instead, this leads them to feel bitter, used, and taken for granted. Rescuers tend to think of themselves as big-hearted or giving to a fault. Yet, they derive their self-worth from others because they want to feel needed. Playing the role of the rescuer can make us feel like a hero and give us the feeling that we're worthwhile and making a difference. Everyone wants to feel valued, needed, and worthwhile. Many of us can relate to the rescuer role because there are a number of ways that we can rescue that are either protective or over-nurturing, which is both a masculine and feminine archetypal role. For instance, people can rescue others from various hardships whether emotionally, physically, spiritually, or financially, such as playing the family doctor, healer, preacher, savior, or hero. Fixing others is an unconscious way to avoid making corrections within ourselves and passively exercising control over others. The attributes of these archetypes, such as wanting partnership patterns, and your archetype 26. Approval by saving others, rescuer, hoping for empathy and understanding, victim, seeking power and recognition, persecutor, are clues as to how we can express and give greater unconditional love to ourselves because it is reflecting what we are lacking emotionally. Our good intentions to save or rescue other people will only cause more harm in the process because it will add to our existing burdens and cause us to take others' power away, keeping this entanglement going. Rescuers will eventually feel unappreciated and overburdened with no apparent payoff. So, as we can see, the attempt to save others from their struggle is equally damaging to the rescuer as it is the victim. Relieving themselves of this role helps to remove the burdens that do not belong to them and also prevents the victim from taking advantage of those intending to help. In place of rescuing, we can rise by lifting others through empowerment. For example, we can assist others by creating scenarios that are mutually beneficial, not placing oneself above another. When we exercise our faith in others such as believing in people who might find themselves in a victim position, then we can create positive outcomes that are empowering in the lives of both involved. When we let go of wanting to feel needed by others and attempting to generate value by saving them, we can achieve healthy and rewarding relationships. Breaking from these roles allows us to develop true unconditional love, free from attachments and egoic impulses, deriving worth only from the self, which can eliminate the unhealthy dependency on one another. When we respond negatively toward others, such as reacting with getting and protecting behaviors, they are examples of distorted and misdirected love because we feel empty and alone, which is our source of insecurity. As we come to see our own behavior and the behavior of others through this perspective, it can help us to eliminate our anger and guilt towards these behaviors, increasing our compassion and insight into all types of human behavior. Simply put, once we understand getting and protecting behaviors, we understand all human behavior. Greg Bear. Partnership patterns and your archetype 27. Emotional reward. Participants in the drama triangle first learn their habitual role in their family of origin that develops as a result of dysfunctional interactions within family patterns, starting with the father-mother-child triad and sibling interactions. Each position in the triangle has a payoff for those playing it. They each get their unspoken psychological needs met in a manner they feel justified, without having to acknowledge the broader dysfunction or harm done in the situation as a whole. Kerr, Bowen Family Systems Theory, 2000. This is where the codependency lies. To demonstrate, the rescuer is someone who has a covert motive and is actually benefiting egoically in some way from being the one who rescues and appears to make great efforts to solve the problem. Rescuers foster dependency to feel important and get a self-esteem boost, receive a respected status, or derive enjoyment by having someone trust and depend on them, causing them to feel superior, but at a deeper level plays upon the victim in order to continue receiving a psychological payoff. The victim gets their needs met by feeling safe and rescued from the persecutor and having the rescuer take care of them. They want to feel understood and treated fairly, explaining why their situation was unjust. They seek validation, sympathy, attention, and support in place of feeling wounded and victimized. The persecutor derives a false sense of power by taking charge of people and situations. It prevents them from being at the mercy of others, helping them to avoid feeling defenseless or appearing weak and vulnerable, using the victim as their scapegoat instead of taking emotional responsibility and accountability for partnership patterns and your archetype 28. Their hurt, pride, or anger. They pride themselves on being dependable while seeing others as incapable. This origin is derived from the ego's need to be right. Persecutors and rescuers need victims to build their own sense of power and superiority, and victims need rescuers and persecutors to reinforce their sense of helplessness and powerlessness. It's an ongoing codependent cycle. When we behave like the persecutor or rescuer, we use manipulation and control, which are common drama and power struggle behaviors, as an unconscious attempt to derive power from others. Yet, this power source is outside of us and causes us to depend on others for our source of power. Again, this is an ineffective strategy that only feeds the insecurities of the ego as opposed to building on true inner peace and emotional security. When we behave like victims, we believe that things are outside of our control and happening to us, giving our power away to others or our situation. The antidote, then, to these drama-intense relationship transactions rests on personal empowerment when discovering the emotional rewards that perpetuate the codependent patterns and depriving the players of their payoff, or by eliminating the dependence on the emotional reward. Wikipedia contributors, 2018. Hopefully retiring our fire extinguishers. Partnership patterns and your archetype 29. So what's the solution? A simple reiteration. Although we may identify more with a primary role, we typically rotate between roles throughout different scenarios in our life. Regardless of what position we start at in the triangle, all roles inevitably originate from and end up in the victim position because these roles exist from the constructs of unconscious power struggles that arise from a lack of personal empowerment and accountability. The drama triangle is an illustration of our ego's impulses from unconscious processes that run our primitive fight or flight responses from many generations of emotionally reactive behaviors. To break from these entanglements and step into empowerment consciousness, we need to start by being honest with ourselves and about ourselves. As taught in our genetic recoding e-courses, if we desire change, we must be willing to change. Wherever we're experiencing resistance in our life is indicative of where we're not willing to change, and it often starts with coming to terms with the current reality and overcoming any feelings of shame before changing, which always begins with an awareness of the problem. Otherwise, we limit the resources that would enable us to develop problem-solving skills that will empower us throughout our lives and carry us through other challenging times in codependent relationships. If we merely hope that someone will rescue us from all the wrongs in our lives, we will develop an endless crippling dependency on others to bail us out of our often self-imposed challenges without employing our own innate wisdom and intellect. Partnership patterns and your archetype 30. Goodbye opportunity to succeed. This is a futile method of codependency versus self-empowerment. We can apply personal power to our circumstances, making it possible to transform the conditions in our lives, even neutralizing past experiences and hurts. By taking personal responsibility for your emotions and perceptions, you will no longer be a victim of the events in your life, but rather the events of your life will become a conscious manifestation of your creations. This will enable you to experience true self-mastery. Now that you are familiar with the drama triangle, ask yourself these 3 questions. 1. Although there's most likely no malintent, awareness into our personal behaviors is the first step to our transformation. Can you identify the common thread hidden in each of these roles, that beneath each of them is a wounded inner child, a victim needing to feel unconditionally loved? 2. Are there specific people in your life that heighten emotional triggers more than others? Knowing this will be significant as we explore the next step and should help enhance deeper self-awareness. 3. What is the emotions this person or event activates in you that leads you to play this role? Trace the emotion to the core or primary limiting belief this event or person is triggering within you. Oftentimes, it requires us to search deep into our psyche to discover the answers that will help us decode core emotions and belief systems. Partnership patterns and your archetype 31. Whether you are experiencing ongoing conflicts within primary relationships, codependency, or generational patterns, overgiving and rescuing others, not feeling good enough, believing in limitations rather than experiencing more abundance, or fear of facing your inner demons, there's a reason you may be avoiding particular challenges that's common to all. We'll cover the reasons why and what you can do to pull back the curtain and put the power back in your hands with solutions to swiftly and effectively resolve it. By starting with ourselves, we can gain greater self-worth to prevent ongoing cycles of self-defeat, and most importantly, increase more love and expand your capacity to receive more. This concept stems from a holistic standpoint to provide insight and understanding of the underlying causes of our codependent behaviors. Thus, revealing our core issues and standard human needs, that every human's underlying need and desire is for real love unconditional. This brings tremendous hope to overcome our addictive behaviors, and the self-empowerment that it brings can enable us to build healthy relationships with others that first start with the one we have with ourselves. In this course series, we will discover how this real love needs to come from ourselves before we ever try to get love or pleasure from anything or anyone else. Self-love and gratitude with a mutually beneficial and supportive relationship approach is the answer. Demonstrating personal accountability and expressing genuine gratitude, free of attachments, will more often transform and transmute any interrelational conflict. Once we love ourselves at a higher, unconditional magnitude, we will have the wisdom to set healthy boundaries from the place of love within these relationships for each archetype to learn on their own, a higher path to their self-love and acceptance. Partnership patterns and your archetype 32. An analogy of the gardener, a valuable lesson for each of us. The story of the well-meaning gardener that attempted to help the butterfly from the eclosion process by freeing it from the chrysalis demonstrates a very challenging, yet extremely valuable lesson for each of us. Struggling is an integral part of everyone's growth experiences and transformation process. In fact, it is the struggle that gives us the ability to develop our wings to fly. Our good intentions to save or rescue others will only cause them more harm because it will disempower and enable them by taking their power or wings away, depriving them of developing the necessary competence and skills in life. The gardener did not realize that the struggle is part of the transformation process. Attempting to eliminate the struggle of the butterfly's emergence from the chrysalis in fact hurts or could even kill the butterfly. Similarly, helping a struggling chick hatch from an egg would also kill the inhabitant. Learning how to overcome our own challenges and obstacles is a natural part of all forms of life and for all of life's creation. While the caterpillar is looked upon as an unworthy creature because it is overindulgent and destructive, it was not designed to remain in that condition. Like each of us, it is intended to become a different creature. The caterpillar had to become literally so fed up being a caterpillar from overindulgence, similar to our addictions, that it was willing to struggle through the metamorphosis process to be liberated as a new creation in the embodiment of a better version of itself, a butterfly. We too are designed to be fashioned into something more, that is life-giving and life-promoting. It's important to note that metamorphosis is not about a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, but an internal journey the caterpillar must take to become a butterfly. It is a rebirth that renews, remolds, and aligns us with our higher phase of existence, from surviving to thriving. The overconsumption of the caterpillar to that of the pollinating contribution of the butterfly. Oftentimes, partnership patterns and your archetype 33. We are required to make radical life changes. Yet, it is our path to liberty and self-mastery. If you're ready for greater self-love and want to complete your inner work with ease and guidance, or you're ready to advance your practice with our fully accredited diploma courses with the 7-step PNACEA system, please visit the links provided below or visit https://www.liber8edliving.com/courses-workshops. The 7-step PNACEA is a model that guides you to your own answers to both overcome and alchemize life challenges, great or small. This proven model is designed for deeper inner work to heal relationship conflict and overcome codependency patterns, enhance unconditional love and establish conscious relationships, overcome unhealthy family patterns, neutralize emotional scars, align you to your soul purpose and authentic path, unlock your DNA and mind potential enabling you to thrive, and most importantly, love yourself the way you deserve to be loved since no one can do that for us. Click here to learn more. Click here to learn more about Liberated Living self-healing courses and fully accredited diplomas. Partnership patterns and your archetype 34. 7-step empowerment strategies. Liberated Living's courses teach a 7-step panacea model to go deep enough to address our core challenge and the psychology of our belief, not only on a subconscious level but on a genetic level, getting to the root. This naturally reprograms the subconscious mind to permanently break codependency cycles and experience conscious, fulfilling relationships and live life more powerfully. This ebook qualifies as a prerequisite in our practitioner's e-course. Through the groundbreaking steps of genetic recoding, you will be guided to your own answers, enabling you to improve your psychology and neurochemistry, overcome sabotage cycles and codependency, proportionately give and receive, overcome power struggles, break generational patterns, heal your mind, limiting beliefs, and cognitive distortions, gain higher self-awareness to avoid more repeated and painful lessons, learn how to feel your best, activating your potential and align to a fulfilling purpose, heal interrelational dynamics, and enjoy profound, conscious relationships, walking away with greater self-love, insight, wisdom, heart-mind coherence techniques, mindfulness living, and a fully accredited practitioner diploma. Do I have to be well-versed in the field of psychology to benefit? Psychology may be a complex subject to some. However, it is one of the most valuable subjects we can learn to better understand the mechanics of our own mind. Partnership patterns and your archetype 35. So we can utilize its power to change our lives if we are to advance our thinking and belief structures. Even learning these fundamental concepts and strategies will greatly enhance your romantic and primary relationships on a day-to-day basis. Working with clients for more than 20 years, we discovered the common denominator underpinning their core chief complaints and challenges, including our own, and what we found was, inherited subconscious beliefs and imprinted programs constituted more than 80% psychology and a conditioned mindset, including ours. This inspired us to co-author and craft our own signature courses in our practice with clients, designed to effectively guide them to overcome their inherent generational and subconscious programs using our panacea model. The definition of panacea is a remedy for all ills or difficulties, a cure-all. We all deserve to overcome these challenges and experience unconditional peace and love within relationships, but we must also embody self-love first and foremost. Genetic recoding can prevent us from sabotaging our own efforts. We must also start by reprogramming the belief and face the psychology of our fears to heal any hardships from our past by getting to the core limiting beliefs that cause our sabotage patterns to correctly resolve and set them free. Only then will we effectively break the pattern. It doesn't need to be scary. Making friends with our fears and weaknesses will not only help us overcome the fear and discover our innate strengths, but will also help us embody unconditional love for ourselves, so we can also embody it for others, to establish mutual empowerment within our primary relationships and create lifelong love and liberation. We're all well aware that we can't assign others the responsibility to love us for ourselves. That is our responsibility alone. Only we have the power to validate our own self-worth. Partnership patterns and your archetype 36. Liberated Living's 7-step panacea system is designed to reprogram these inherent beliefs and sabotage patterns with ease, reprogramming the subconscious mind, recoding and healing the DNA to both access and activate the full 90% plus brain and mind/DNA potential. For those of you who are already succeeding at running a practice, and yet still need a few more keys to thrive, make a difference, and take your life or career to the next level as many others have, you can shortcut your success with these quick 7 steps, which you're probably not currently using and can implement immediately to rapidly advance your results, align to a more meaningful practice and income potential that you feel is deserving of you. Having these healing strategies at our immediate disposal became powerful tools in our profession that allowed us to follow a system that was designed to empower anyone who has undergone challenges in a spiritual, emotional, or physical capacity. These empowering and decoding tools can pull others out of the same trap that we were once in and will help rewire their mind for success. These self-study e-courses are also designed to train coaches and therapists to become an expert in their field through genetic recoding registered and expand these empowerment strategies on a wider scale. This was how we crafted our courses and signature healing programs. Partnership patterns and your archetype 37. This genetic recoding system and signature course was drawn from organic, personal life experience from the personal inner workings of ourselves and that of our clients, which inspired a mission of guiding others through their adversities to gain victory over their genetic predispositions and experience breakthroughs. We want to impact more lives and are limited to how many we can fit into a clinical space. With online programs, we have the privilege of inspiring change and creating an impact on a massive capacity. We feel honored to help those we can reach with this unique and proven healing system. Check out our additional genetic recoding e-courses and e-books. Genetically recode subconscious beliefs. DNA activation with genetic recoding. Recoding. Generational healing with genetic recoding. Break codependency and addiction with genetic recoding. Self-love is the panacea. Is the panacea. Partnership patterns and your archetype 38. References. Chapman, G. 2019. The 5 love languages registered can work for you. Retrieved from https://www.5lovelanguages.com/quizzes. Graham, L. 2019. Resources for recovering resilience. The triangle of victim, rescuer, persecutor, what it is and how to get out. Retrieved from https://lindagram-mft.net/triangle-victim-rescuer-persecutor-get Kerr, Michael E. 2000. One Family Story, a primer on Bowen theory. The Bowen Center for the Study of the Family. http://www.thebowencenter.org. Pert, C. 1997. Molecules of Emotion, The Science Behind Mind-Body Medicine.